Brilliant. I think I'll get started now. Um, Thank you to everyone that's coming to today's session. Before I begin, if anyone needs live captions, you should be able to just turn on the CC or captions button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. If you're having any issues with the captions, you just give us a message on the chat function. My name is Charlie Little, and my pronouns are she and they. And just for visual self-description, I am a white person in their mid-20s with dark blonde, curly, mid-length hair in a wolf cut style. I'm wearing a black shirt and I've got a white background. I'm a deafblind film exhibition access consultant, and I am BFI FAN's EDI champion, supporting the FAN membership on deaf and disabled audiences, access and inclusion. And I'm delighted to be introducing the third session of our BFI FAN EDI and Focus webinar series, looking at inclusive recruitment with Diversity Scotland. Just some housekeeping. The presentation portion of the session is going to be recorded, but the Q&A section won't be. And like I say, there'll be time at the end for Q&A, so do pop any questions into the Q&A function as and when you think of any. So enough from me. I'm delighted to introduce Tony McCaffrey, the founder and CEO of Diversity Scotland. I'm going to pop into the background now, but take it away, Tony.
Thank you so much, Charlie. Good afternoon, everyone. Warm welcome, and also thank you to BFI FAN for having me deliver this session. As has been mentioned, the focus today is on inclusive recruitment and conscious inclusion. By way of introduction, my name is Tony McCaffrey. I'm CEO of Diversity Scotland, which is one of the UK's leading equity, diversity and inclusion consulting practices, known outside of Scotland as Diversity Company. My pronouns are they, them, and for anyone with any sensory loss, I'm a brown-skinned person with black chin-length hair, black and grey beard. I'm wearing a black top, and I speak English with a West of Scotland accent. This session today will be a bit of an introductory taster, really, into what is a fairly broad subject in terms of inclusive hiring and inclusive recruitment. Certainly not something we could cover off in under an hour, but I hope that what we'll get from today's session will be enough to set you up with an interest in learning more about this topic. And also you'll be able to take away some helpful tips and actionable insights. So I perhaps wanted to start just by, I guess, posing the question to ourselves, so what exactly is inclusive hiring? And inclusive hiring is the practice of designing jobs in a way that minimize bias and creating an equitable application, interview, selection and offer process for candidates who come from a diverse range of backgrounds. Now, rather than one single step or process, there are many activities that can contribute to inclusive hiring, and we will start to explore them in a little more depth as we proceed throughout the session. In thinking about why we may need inclusive hiring, there's certainly some considerations that we should take into account around how not having an inclusive process can create limiting factors that will restrict our talent pool. So when we talk about this subject, we mean making a conscious effort to attract a more diverse set of candidates at the very top of the recruitment funnel, and then ensuring that no single group is disadvantaged by any steps that are taken throughout the hiring process. Job design and job descriptions are the foundation point. Getting this right up front is absolutely key. And by not reviewing job descriptions, the likelihood of bias creeps in at a later stage. So visually, this is presented like this on screen. to, I guess, to illustrate that it starts really broad, and at each step, it narrows, and if it's not inclusive, it narrows considerably. So if BFI FAN and associated organisations are underselling the great opportunities within those organisations, then today should hopefully focus our thinking around that in order to ensure that we attract and retain great talent, and consider how we can achieve this through inclusive processes. We will come back a little bit later to language and tone as well. Thinking about those different diverse experiences, identities, and characteristics that that exist across our population, I wanted to just pull out potentially some of those limiting factors, and I've chosen just as an example to focus on ethnicity in the first instance. And we can see that on screen. I guess some of the reasons that we need to absolutely start the process of inclusive recruitment with having a diverse talent pool. So as one example in relation to ethnicity, when the final candidate pool has only one racialized candidate, they have virtually no chance of being hired. But if there are at least two racialized people in the final candidate pool, the odds are 194 times greater. Undertaking certain activities in the recruitment process, like referral programs, will tend to favour people from the dominant groups within an organisation and across society. And pay scale, the organisation conducted some research recently that showed that referral programs tend to favour white men more than any other demographic. And of course, whilst that's helpful if we're looking to address perhaps underrepresentation of white men in our organisations, if that's not an area that we're focusing on, then perhaps referral programmes need to be looked at closely. When men were asked about their professional networks, 63% of them state that it's comprised of more or of all men, which is a piece of research that was founded by McKinsey. So again, if we're thinking about diversifying our workforce beyond particular demographic groups and to try to step away from perhaps some homogenous environments, we need to think about how using network referrals, and again, those types of employee referral programs may result in more of that homogeneity and may not be the most inclusive way to attract a diverse range of talent. So, Pinterest have said that, don't rely on your network to hire. Identify all the places where people from marginalized groups might job search. This tactic itself helped Pinterest attract 55% more candidates from the global ethnic majority in a year, which is a really impressive statistic. So those were just some things I wanted to think about in terms of framing around just one particular demographic or segment or characteristic of people who are in the job market, and that's in relation to ethnicity. Of course, there are a whole host of other considerations, whether it's looking at women, whether it's looking at people who are neurodivergent, people who are disabled, and again, even within that, that umbrella term of disabled, all of the range of different disabilities, we might want to be specific about our efforts. Looking at people who are caregivers, people from the LGBTQ+ community, and so on and so forth. I'd like to move on, though, to talking about how we can look at inclusive recruitment across a number of different stages of the recruitment life cycle. So I'm going to do that by beginning to discuss what the inclusive recruitment life cycle is in the first instance. So there are 4 key stages. The first being job design. Job design is about structuring roles to be accessible and equitable, removing barriers and appealing to a diverse range of talent from the very start of the recruitment process. After job design, we move on to attraction, which is drawing diverse talent by promoting an inclusive culture and values that resonate with varied backgrounds and experiences. The application stage is accessible, unbiased. It should be making it easy for a diverse range of people, a diverse range of candidates to showcase their skills and their experiences. And then, of course, we move on to the selection stage. And an inclusive recruitment process, the selection stage is about fair, objective assessments to identify the best talent whilst reducing bias at every single stage. Now, I'd like us to dig into these in a little bit more detail. And as I said earlier, this is a bit of a taster session, so we won't get the full range of considerations around each of these sections, but hopefully enough to be useful and to provide you with some meaningful context. So if we start by looking at inclusive job design. So inclusive job design is based on defining inclusive and objective criteria for a role that's free from bias and adverse impact, and that is consistently and rigorously applied and measured. This should ultimately, if done correctly, set up the foundations for robust assessment throughout the rest of the process. So there is a framework that we can follow when it comes to inclusive job design. And the first stage of that focuses on organizational analysis. So this covers the organization and the aspects facing the part of the business within which a particular role sits. So whilst asking these questions, the organizational structure, roles and responsibilities of other relevant posts within that structure should also be reviewed. So in looking at a role and designing a role, we should be thinking, what are the key priorities for this role? If it's a fixed term role, it may be what are the key priorities for the 12 months fixed term for this role? If it's a permanent role, we might be considering aligning those priorities to other wider organizational goals or action plans. So for example, what are the key priorities for the next 3 to 5 years? We should also be asking ourselves, what are the main challenges facing the organization and the role? We should be asking, what changes can you see affecting the way that this role is delivered in the future? Many organizations who are designing new roles at the moment or who are reviewing the design of existing roles are very mindful at the rapid pace of technology, and perhaps considering in what ways artificial intelligence might affect how a role is delivered in the future. And we should also be asking ourselves and considering, what are the opportunities for the organization that come with creating and filling this role? So that's the organizational analysis piece. Then we start to really look at the role. We look at it in isolation and do the role analysis. And this ensures that when it comes to shortlisting, that key stakeholders are clear of the details and practicalities of the role and are more likely to foresee any challenges that might arise later in the process. So we should be asking questions like, what is the main purpose of this role? What are the key deliverables? What are the major responsibilities of the position, and estimate how much time will be spent on each responsibility? What are the critical success factors for the role? We should also be clarifying the metrics for this role, the number of direct reports, the total headcount, any budget responsibility that the role holder may have, any responsibility for turnover, for key measurable organizational targets, because this will greatly facilitate our selection decisions. Knowing the scope and scale of a role and what level of experience might be required to undertake it will certainly help with that. And then the third stage of an inclusive job design framework is to look at candidate specification. All aspects of the candidate specification must link directly to the outputs of the organizational and role analysis, and it must be able to stand up to scrutiny So what specific experience must the candidate have? What technical expertise and knowledge must the candidate have? We should be considering soft skills and competencies, as well as those hard skills and competencies, to ensure that there's no adverse impact on women, disabled people, younger or older candidates. And instead of saying things like good communication skills, we need to be specific. Communicate a clear vision to unify everyone's efforts and make each individual feel a part of the team would be a far more effective way of setting out a candidate specification than simply saying good communication skills. And we also need to consider what good would look like against each element of the candidate specification. You know, we should be agreeing that with all stakeholders. For example, a good team leader may be interpreted by one stakeholder, one senior leader in your organization, as someone that pushes the team to the limit to get results, whereas another stakeholder it might mean that it's about adopting their style according to the audience and the development needs of the individual. You know, so they could be more focused on the individual's motivational skills. So again, this is as part of that job design framework, there's an element there of being able to harmonize the expectations of the people who have a stake in the creation of this role and the filling of this role with a candidate who will ultimately become the job holder. The golden rule is that the candidate specification is not discussed until the organisational and role analysis have been completed. This is something that I see and have seen over the last 30 plus years in my career happening all the time. A new role is created or a new position becomes available and somebody says, oh, we need to look at the job spec, or we need to look at the job description and a role profile. And that's done without actually completing any organisational or role analysis. And this leads us to issues later down the line. And those issues often result in increased homogeneity and a lack of diversity coming into our teams, because those issues lead us to just hiring someone like who we think is the best person for the role without any evidence base sitting under it. So I want to explore some barriers to inclusive job design. Now, there are a whole host of, I guess, speech bubbles on screen that set out what some of the barriers to inclusive job design may be. Things like years of experience, which would immediately impact on younger people, but also on those who are new to the market. Years of experience doesn't reflect the skills that an individual has required, and therefore is not really a reliable measure of talent. So when we see something in an advert that says 5 years of experience, there has to be a really good reason why a certain number of years of experience is required, as opposed to being more explicit about the type of experience that is required. Years on the job, years in an industry does not equate to skills. Previous experience in the market. You know, this criteria fuels the status quo. It increases the likelihood of homogeneity and a lack of diversity in our teams and in our organisations. It prevents more diverse talent from outside of the sector from entering into the sector. Because if we're only looking for people with previous experience in the market, it says we're not going to invest any time in training you. We're not going to invest any time in mentoring you, in coaching you, in helping acclimatise you to the way that we do things around here. We just want someone that works in this market already who can come in and hit the ground running, and we don't need to bother about you. There's very limited investment going to be placed in your career. A degree. When we see that a degree is required for a particular role, even if it says, you know, any degree will do and it doesn't have to be specific to an industry. That can be really problematic and can be exclusionary and is certainly a barrier to inclusive job design. A lack of social diversity, a lack of an average or above average level of socioeconomic privilege could come into play here. We only have to look across the varying parts of the United Kingdom and we can see that access to higher education is very different whether or not you have to pay for it and you have to pay fees. You know, so we are very much setting people apart based on things that are potentially not relevant to the specification of the job. You know, for example, in 2017, around a tenth of people who went to Oxford University came from disadvantaged backgrounds. You know, that year there were only 35 students who identified as Black at Oxford, and only 40 that attended Cambridge. You know, this is not a good indicator of future job performance. So again, unless there is a legal or a regulatory requirement around having a specific degree, I would question how inclusive that is. There's also things like how we advertise the working patterns of roles. You know, that it's a full-time role, for example. In today's world, and given the differing needs and wants across the 4 to 5 generations that are in the workplace, flexible working opportunities really must be considered. And I think oftentimes when people think of flexible working, they automatically think remote working or working from home. That's absolutely not the case, and there's a lot more to that. I'm often surprised at how few organisations invest in having job shares for their roles. And I think that's a real shame that we have lost something that certainly when I started out in the world of work a very long time ago was a lot more common, it would seem, than it is now. So these are just some of the things that we might want to consider. And, you know, another one just to draw out a full clean driving licence is often something that's very standard in job adverts. Again, I would question how relevant that always is. If somebody needs to drive in the job, or you might need the flexibility of someone being able to drive in the job, okay, they might need a driving license. Does it have to be fully clean? You know, does someone having 3 points on their license, you know, preclude them from gaining employment with your organisation? Something that you might want to really think about. So these are just some examples. And again, as we come into the Q&A at the end of the session, feel free to ask for more information or discuss why some of these may be barriers to job design. Another barrier, though, certainly is around the language that we use. Gendered language in jobs, in job adverts, in job descriptions, in candidate specifications can reinforce stereotypes and discourage applicants from a diverse range of backgrounds. Clearly, because of what we're discussing, gendered language, it can specifically have an impact on people of a particular gender. Research, and a whole host of research from a number of different sources, shows that masculine coded language may have an adverse impact on women and gender non-conforming people from applying for a job or for feeling connected to a job description, whereas alternative non-masculine coded language does not in any way create an adverse impact for men. It is thought to be more inclusive of people of all genders and all identities. It's also worth pointing out that research has shown that masculine coded language also can create an adverse impact for people from a range of other marginalised and minoritized backgrounds and identities too, completely unrelated to gender. So I think there's something there around us ensuring that we are not using masculine coded language in any of the ways that we set up and design a job. So just lastly on job design, a lot of information, a lot of text on screen. This is a good time, I think, to point out that BFI Fan will receive a post-session handbook with the content of today's session, so that people don't have to furiously take notes of everything that's on screen or that's being discussed today. And the content will be available in that post-workshop, post-session handbook, so that people can refer to it and use it as an aid memoir. But just pulling out a few of the things that are on screen in terms of a checklist. So being consistent is really perhaps the biggest thing, consistent across how we design jobs, having a format and a process for that, perhaps across your entire network of organisations, is something that you may want to look at. Ensure that language and tone is inclusive. Ensure that you're not using acronyms or colloquialisms. Think about what was mentioned about including years of experience. Also, job descriptions, when they're being designed, should be short and punchy. Between 6 to 10 statements is more than enough. Excuse me. It should be attractive and engaging. It should be outcome focused rather than task focused. It needs to be realistic and achievable. It needs to be measurable and quantifiable. So, and last and most importantly of what I would like to draw out is that we should be containing only essential criteria so that we don't end up with a wish list and people feeling like, oh, well, you know, the desirable criteria is the area that I don't really meet and it puts me off from applying. So we're now going to move on to looking at attraction. So as we mentioned before, attraction is about drawing a diverse range of talent by promoting an inclusive culture and values that resonate with varied backgrounds and experiences. As we consider attracting candidates to our organisations, the first thing that we need to consider is our employer brand. Excuse me, I'm going to cough. Considering our employer brand is so important. We often think about the brands of our organisations as consumer brands. We're thinking about those service users if we don't identify them as customers per se. But actually, it's just as important to have an employer brand. And that's about the image that you project both to people internally within your company, but also to potential colleagues, those potential job applicants from outside your organisation. And it should differentiate what you offer. Before a candidate becomes aware of your organisation as a potential employee, they will often gather information about you through your employer brand. So we need to think about how we position that. So the CIPD, the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, points out that your organisation will have an employer brand whether you have consciously developed it or not. It's based on the way that your organisation is seen as a place to work by potential recruits, current colleagues, leavers, and retirees. And it's not just about reiterating the organisational mission statement or setting out what your values are on your website or next to where your jobs are advertised, but it's predicated on the real lived experience of the people that work at your organisation. You know, people who like the job that they do and the place they work want to become advocates for it. So a key aspect of employer brand is including your employees in building your employer brand. Sitting alongside employer brand is employer value proposition, EVP. And that is essentially the articulation of your employer brand that answers the question, why should I work for your company, as well as why should I stay at this company? So employer brand is the reputation and EVP is the narrative. So let's look at EVP. If your employer brand is in some sense a promise that you make to your current and future colleagues, your employer value proposition, your EVP, is how you keep that promise. Why? Well, because your EVP is all of the ways that you provide value to your current and future colleagues. So, I mean, this might be everything from a free lunch and a cool office space right through to, excuse me, educational opportunities, the chance to make impactful decisions on meaningful projects, or opportunities to gain recognition within your chosen field. I love how I'm starting to have a very sore throat this morning when I'm doing all of the talking, so excuse me. Not every EVP will appeal to every possible candidate. So the trick is to work towards providing value in ways that will appeal to your target hiring demographic, to say nothing of your current team. So if your employer brand is a story, your EVP is the setting and characters of that story, i.e. the elements that make the story possible rather than the story itself. In terms of thinking about building and promoting an inclusive employer brand, start with your colleagues. Without their buy-in and support, it'll be impossible to build a culture of inclusion and establish your employer brand effectively. Promote your equity and inclusion initiatives among colleagues and identify allies and partners who will get involved and who will help spread the word. You should also be regularly checking review sites like Glassdoor and Indeed, because lots of people will go onto those sites and not only apply for jobs through those sites because they act as job boards, they'll also research your organization, and they will look at reviews and they will leave reviews about their experience of interacting with you as either a potential employer, a current employer, or as a past employer. So it's really important to to be aware of what are on those sites, Glassdoor, Indeed, and a whole range of other sites out there as well. It's quite important to share both your wins around as what you do as an organization, both externally and internally. If you think about lots of organizations will share updates through social media, whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever blogs that perhaps people in the organization have. How much of that is directly integrated in where you also advertise jobs at your organization? You know, are you updating your careers pages regularly, or are they very static? Are you just hoping that, you know, people will explore your website and look at your blogs or look at your social media? There's definitely a key piece there around integrating both of those things. And perhaps the biggest consideration is that when you are actually advertising a role, good writing is in many cases the key to promoting inclusion. Now, according to research, job openings advertised using inclusive language get filled around 20% faster and attract as much as 25% more candidates from historically excluded, marginalised and minoritised groups. So it just goes to show that if we're thinking about this through an EDI lens, for want of a better term, your recruitment through an EDI lens, then how you write your adverts is absolutely key. We should be avoiding extreme language, the type of language that can discourage applicants from certain candidates, from applications from certain candidates. Rather than saying like, oh, we need an expert in this, it would be better to say something like experience working with this technology to achieve blah, rather than using quite strong words like expert, because that asks people to analyze their own expertise in a way that they might not feel comfortable with. Avoid words that may convey stereotypes. Words like compete or dominant will reflect masculinity. People who are driven, for example, I see that word quite a lot. We're looking for someone who's driven or to drive forward. Whereas words like motivated actually have a far less potential for adverse impact. Avoid unclear or unnecessary requirements. You might have this unending list of qualifications in mind for a given role, but in order to highlight your commitment to inclusion, it's important to trim that list down. That's because studies show that while men are likely to apply for jobs which they meet only 60% of the qualification, women and people from a range of other minoritized or marginalized groups are much more likely to hesitate in submitting an application for a job unless they meet 100% of the listed requirements. So instead of including all of the nice to haves that a dream candidate might possess, stick to the must haves, and you'll likely see an increased diversity in your applicant pool. Convey a growth mindset. Organisations that are committed to the development of their employees are more likely to attract candidates from groups that are not really represented in their organisation at the moment. So it's important to demonstrate how you will develop and how you're open to developing skills and experience and competence for people you bring into the organisation. It's organisations that display a quite clear growth mindset in their job adverts are 1.5 times they are likely to fill their roles 1.5 times more quickly than other organisations that don't display that. And that research actually comes from an analysis on 60,000 job adverts. Use language that's personal. Try to place, help a person place themselves in the organisation. I get a little bit of the ick when I see job adverts that say things like the role holder, or even worse, it will just say the role will do this. Use personal language. Use you love finding the best solution to a problem. Talk about us, we, you. Use that language to really personalize it. Also, whilst we've said all of that, it's important to also be concise. So not to have those 20, those lists of 20 things that are required for a role. You really have to start to question if there are, 20 essential criteria and 10 desirable criteria. Is this really a job just for one person? Is this a job where there's only maybe 1 or 2 people out there in the market that can do it as it stands currently, or are you open again to development? Obviously, as mentioned as well, demonstrating a commitment to what your organizational approach is to equity and inclusion, and that's probably wrapped up in your organizational values, is quite important. But try not to make that performative. you know, I think it's really important that it's authentic, and this comes back to perhaps consulting with your current colleagues, and ensuring that there's an authenticity to your message as well. People can smell the BS a mile away, if they think that, you know, what they see at the bottom of a job advert is that bog standard. We're an equal opportunities employer. We are committed to, you know, not discriminating on the grounds of age, race, gender. I mean, that's really pretty meaningless. That's the law. That's basic compliance. That's not a commitment to inclusion. That's compliance to the Equality Act. So there's a very big difference between those two things, and people will smell that disconnect. So it's important to be far more authentic and thoughtful around how you do that, and tie that to your company's purpose, your organizational values. There are quite a few places online that claim to be sort of, want of a better term, diversity job boards. I've listed some of these on screen, as well as my own organisation, Diversity Scotland. I would suggest that you do your research on how effective these job boards are, and how they are proactively connecting with the groups, the demographic groups in society that they're saying they do. You know, some of these job boards, anyone could create a job board and put LGBT jobs on top of it. Does that mean that they somehow connect to the LGBT community, or does it just mean that they are they're piggybacking and they're rainbow washing? So just be mindful of that. Some of these job boards on here and some of these organisations on here are absolutely brilliant. Even Break, in terms of the disability space, really, really good. You know, so it's really worth doing your own research into this before you spend money advertising a job somewhere that just claims to produce greater diversity. None of these things are silver bullet. There should be a whole range of attraction channels available to you and chosen by you. But unfortunately, that's for a longer session. So mindful of time, let's move on to the application process. To create an accessible, inclusive application process is absolutely key. We should be thinking about, first of all, multiple formats. You know, in creative industries, traditional applications may not fully capture an applicant's potential. So are we allowing submissions that showcase practical skills, such as project examples, short reels, video intros, instead of or alongside a traditional CV? This approach can help candidates demonstrate their relevant skills in ways aligned with their strengths, and making it a fairer evaluation tool. They should be accessible, using concise forms, you know, keep forms brief, limit questions, and absolutely on your application form there should be guidance on adjustments. Many candidates hesitate to request adjustments to the recruitment process due to concerns about stigma. So we need to clearly communicate that reasonable adjustments are available and encouraged, and list a direct contact for any requests in relation to that. That visibility signals inclusivity and removes barriers for candidates with disabilities, neurodivergence, or perhaps a range of other specific needs. So thinking about the selection process, if we want our assessment processes, when we're actually selecting a candidate to be fair and inclusive, they need to be objective. And that means that we need to set evidence-based criteria. So if you're doing an application review, if you are having a face-to-face interview or a virtual interview, do you have really strong criteria that aligns right back to that organizational analysis, that role analysis, and that candidate specification that you've completed in the job design process? Oftentimes, when working with organizations, I would be getting them to design their interview stage at that point where they're designing the job, because that's the time when it's all fresh in your mind and you're actually able to do the work as one project. rather than, you know, throwing a job advert out there without doing any job design, hoping for the best that we get some applications, and then you know, doing a CV review with somebody, or using an outdated, irrelevant set of questions that have not been honed specifically for that job. So it's really important that the shortlisting criteria for a role is inclusive. Likewise, creating an evaluation matrix when you are shortlisting. So whether that's a spreadsheet or something like that that you create and that you fill out after every interview that's conducted. You don't evaluate the candidate until all candidates have been interviewed, and then you're comparing them against the criteria rather than comparing them against each other. That will help to reduce bias. So that was a very quick taster of inclusive recruitment. And I think it's really important when we are considering inclusive recruitment to also consider bias, as I have just mentioned. Cognitive bias, also known as unconscious or implicit bias, is something that we need to be very careful of thinking about in the recruitment process. And as I take another sip of water, I'm going to play you a video and save my voice, just to provide a bit of a quick overview of what exactly unconscious bias is.
The unconscious mind is amazing. It can process vastly more information than our conscious mind by using shortcuts based on our background, cultural environment, and personal experiences to make almost instantaneous decisions about everything around us. The snag is, it's wrong quite a lot of the time, especially on matters that need rational thinking. Here's a classic example. A bat and a ball cost £1 10p. If the bat costs £1 more than the ball, how much does the ball cost? Most people, including over 50% of students at some of the world's leading universities, get the answer wrong and say 10p. The answer is actually 5p. Many of us choose 10p without thinking. This is because our unconscious mind uses instinct, not analysis. So our unconscious is fallible. It's also biased. It makes snap judgments of people we meet, categorizing them according to gender, social and other characteristics. In milliseconds, we judge whether somebody is like us and belongs to our in-group. These are the people we favor. So men might favor men, while women might favor women. However, we can belong to different in-groups, and we like to be part of an in-group that's powerful, which could mean a woman favoring a man over a woman. That's unconscious bias.
So very much a whistle-stop tour of what unconscious bias is there. There are over 200 documented cognitive biases, and I'd like to just quickly share in the last minute or two some of the most common that we see on a day-to-day basis, particularly in relation to recruitment. So we have affinity bias, which is where we feel a connection. It's a tendency to feel as though we have a natural connection with people who are similar to us, which can really underpin and uphold that homogeneity that I spoke about earlier. Then there's perception bias, which is when we believe something is typical of a particular group of people based on cultural stereotypes or assumptions. Something we need to be really careful about in recruitment. The halo effect, when we project positive qualities onto people without actually knowing them. You know, if we do that, we become susceptible to the halo effect. And conversely, there's the horns effect, which describes how our initial opinion of someone means that we continually associate them with negative characteristics. And lastly, confirmation bias. We generally look to confirm our own opinions and pre-existing ideas about a particular person or a particular group of people. When we enter a situation hoping to have our initial expectations met, this is often an example of confirmation bias. All of these considerations, as I said, are very much a sort of whistle-stop tour and introductory taster to the broad topics that we must consider to ensure that our recruitment efforts are inclusive. And I'd be happy to take any questions from anyone.
Thank you so much, Tony, for that
Thank you, Charlie.
presentation. I'll just wait to see if anyone has any questions. Please feel free to put them in the Q&A function or the chat function if that's easier for you. Yeah, thank you so much for that presentation. There was definitely a few things I related to with a disabled person that's struggled to access even interviews and things like that. And it was really interesting hearing about the barriers and even things like the driving license. I can't drive because of my sight, and I've applied to so many office-based jobs where travel isn't necessarily necessary, but they would still mention about having a driving license, or they wouldn't think, well, people can access public transport or taxis. It's just things like that that you say that can put off, you know, potentially really valuable employees from joining your company or organization. So it's really about reimagining the way that we work and the way that we advertise work as well.
Absolutely. I didn't pass my driving test. I didn't start learning to or pass my driving test until I was in my mid-40s. And I managed to have a perfectly fulfilling and successful career up until that point. And, you know, so as a leader and as a recruiter, was always very cognizant of that being something I didn't like seeing in job descriptions or in job adverts, because I knew how entirely possible it was to create a barrier for people that doesn't need to be a barrier. So yeah, that there's many things like that that I really question. Is still a question that is still legal to say that, unless it's an actual requirement of the job, as in you are a bus driver or a lorry driver, then it's the same organizations often who'll put that in their job, but they're not willing to pay for your car insurance when they want you to conduct work in your own car during company time, which for most people, their car insurance doesn't even cover them to do anyway. So they would actually be in breach of their insurance and would be committing a crime by doing that. So
yeah, one thing that I often see across job applications is being able to lift a certain amount of weight. And even though it's jobs and positions that aren't manual labor based, and again, it's just that outdated way of thinking. It's almost like copy and paste a little bit, rather than just trying to constantly assess the way that you attract people. Just seen a question